It was very dark. Rusty could sense something was near. The young tomcat's eyes opened wide as he scanned the dense undergrowth. This place was unfamiliar, but the strange scent drew him onward deeper into the shadows. His stomach growled, reminding him of his hunger. He opened his jaw slightly to let the warm smells of the forest reach the scent glands on the roof of his mouth. Musty odors of leaf mold mingled with the tempting aroma of a small furry creature. Suddenly, a flash of gray raced past him. Rusty stopped still, listening. It was hiding in the leaves less than 2 tail lengths away. Rusty knew it was a mouse. He could feel the rapid pulsing of a tiny heart deep into his ear fur. He swallowed, stiffening his rumbling stomach. Soon his hunger would be satisfied. Slowly, he lowered his body into position, crouching for the attack. He was downwind of the mouse. He knew it was not aware of him. With one final check on his prey's position, Rusty pushed back hard on his haunches and sprang, kicking up leaves on the forest floor as he rose. The mouse dived for cover, heading toward a hole in the ground. But Rusty was already on top of it. He scooped into the air, hooking the helpless creature with his 4-inch sharp claws, flinging it up in a high arc onto the leaf-covered ground. The mouse landed dazed, but alive. It tried to run, but Rusty snatched it up again. He tossed the mouse once more, this time a little further away. The mouse managed to scramble a few paces before Rusty caught up with it. Suddenly a noise reared by. Rusty looked around. As he did so, the mouse was able to pull away from his claws. When Rusty turned back and saw it dart into the darkness among the tangled roots of a tree, angry, Rusty gave up the hunt. He spun around, his green eyes glaring, intent on searching out the noise that had cost him his kill. The sound rattled on, becoming more familiar. Rusty blinked over his eyes. The forest had disappeared. He was inside a hot and airless kitchen. Curled in his bed, moonlight flittered through the window, casting shadows on the smooth, hard floor. The noise had been the rattle of hard-dried pellets as they were tipped into his dish. Rusty had been dreaming. Lifting his head, he rested his chin on the side of his bed. His collar rubbed uncomfortably around his neck. In his dream, he had felt the rush air ruffling the soft fur where his collar usually pinched. Rusty rolled on his back, savoring the dream for a few more moments. He could still smell mouse. It was the 3rd time since full moon that he'd had the dream, and every time the mouse had escaped his grasp. He licked his lips. From his bed he could smell the bland odor of his food. His odors always refilled his dish before they went to bed. The dusty smell chased away the warm sense of his dream, but the hunger rumbled on his stomach. So Rusty stretched to sleep out of his limbs and padded across the kitchen floor to his dinner. The food felt dry and tasteless on his tongue. Rusty reluctantly swallowed one more mouthful. Then he turned away from the food dish and pushed his way out for the cat flap, hoping that the smell of the garden would bring back the feelings from his dream. Outside, the moon was bright. It was raining lightly. Rusty stalked down the tidy garden, following the starlit gravel path, feeling the stones cold and sharp beneath his paws. He made his dirt beneath a large bush with glossy green leaves and heavy purple flowers. Their sickly sweet scent clouded the damp air around him, and he curled his lip to drive the smell out of his nostrils. Rusty settled down on top of one of the posts in the fence that marked the limits of his garden. It was his favorite spot of his, as he could see right into the neighboring gardens as well into the dense green forest on the other side of the garden fence. The rain had stopped. Behind him, the close-cropped lawn was bathed in the moonlight, but beyond his fence, the woods were full of shadows. Rusty stretched his head forward to take a sniff of damp air. His skin was warm and dry under his thick coat, but he could feel the weight of raindrops that sparkled onto his ginger fur. He heard his owners giving him one last call from the back door.
Rusty!
If he went to them now, they would greet him with gentle words and caresses and welcome him onto their bed, where he would curl, purring warm in the crook of a bent knee. But this time, Rusty ignored his owner's voices and turned his gaze back into the forest. The crisp smell of the woods had grown fresher after the rain. Suddenly, the fur on his spine prickled. Was something moving out there? Was something watching him? Rusty stared ahead, but it was impossible to see or smell anything in the dark. He lifted his chin boldly, stood up, and stretched one paw gripping each corner of the fence post. As he strained his legs and arched his back, he closed his eyes and breathed in the smell of the woods once more. It had seemed to promise him something, sending him onward into the whispering shadows. Tensing his muscles, he crouched for a moment. Then he leaped lightly down into the rough grass on the other side of the garden fence. As he landed, the bell on his collar rang for the still night air.
"Where are you off to, Rusty?"
Meowed a familiar voice behind him. Rusty looked up. A young black and white cat was balancing ungracefully on the fence.
"Hi, Smudge."
Rusty replied.
"You're not going into the woods, are you?"
Smudge's amber eyes were huge.
"Just for a look."
Rusty promised, shifting uncomfortably.
"You wouldn't get me in there. It's dangerous."
Smudge wrinkled his black nose with distaste.
"Henry said he went into the woods once."
The cat lifted his head and gestured with his nose over the rows of fences toward the garden where Henry lived.
"That fat old tabby's never been into the woods."
Rusty scoffed.
"He's hardly been beyond his own garden since his trip to the vet. All he wants to do is eat and sleep."
"No, really, he got a rabbit in there."
Smudge insisted.
"Well, if he did, it was before the vet. Now he complains about the birds because they disturb his dozing."
"Well, anyway,"
Smudge went on, ignoring the scorn in Rusty's mew.
"Henry told me there are all sorts of dangerous animals out there. Huge wildcats who eat live rabbits for breakfast and sharpen their claws and old bones."
"I'm only going for a look around.
Rusty meowed.
I won't stay long."
"Well, don't say I didn't warn you,"
Purred Smudge. The black and white cat turned and plunged off the fence back down into his own garden. Rusty sat down in the coarse grass beyond the garden fence. He gave his shoulder a nervous slick and wondered how much of Smudge's gossip was true. Suddenly, the movement of a tiny creature caught his eye. He watched it scuttle under some brambles. Instant made him drop into a low crouch. With one slow paw after another, he drew his body forward through the undergrowth. Ears pricked, nostrils flared, eyes unblinking. He moved toward the animal. He could see it clearly now, sitting up among the barbic branches, laying on a large seed held between its paws. It was a mouse. Rusty rocked his haunches from side to side, preparing to leap. He held his breath in case his bell rang again. Excitement coursed through him, making his heart pound. This was even better than his dreams. Then a sudden noise of cracking twigs and crunching leaves made him jump. His bell jangled treacherously, and the mouse darted away into the thickest tangle of the bramble bush. Rusty stood very still and looked around. He could see a white tip of a red bushy tail trailing through a clump of tall ferns up ahead. He smelled a strong, strange scent, definitely a meat-eater, but neither a cat nor dog. Distracted, Rusty forgot about the mouse and watched the red tail curiously. He wanted a better look. All of Rusty's senses strained ahead. As he prowled forward, then he detected another noise. It came from behind, but it sounded muted and distant. He swiveled his ears backward to hear it better.
"Footsteps?"
He wondered, but he kept his eyes fixed on the strange red fur up ahead and continued to creep onward. It was only when a faint rustle behind him became a loud and fast-approaching leaf crackle that Rusty realized he was in danger. The creature hit him like an explosion, and Rusty was thrown sideways into a clump of nettles. Twisting and yowling, he tried to throw off the attacker that had fastened itself to its back. It was gripping him with incredibly sharp claws. Rusty could feel spiked teeth prickling at his neck. He writhed and squirmed from whisker to tail, but he couldn't free himself. For a second, he felt helpless. Then he froze, waking fast. He flipped over onto his back. He knew instantly how dangerous it was to expose his soft belly. But it was his only chance. He was lucky. The ploy seemed to work. He heard a huff beneath him as the breath was knocked out of his attacker. Thrashing furiously, Rusty managed to wriggle free without looking back as he sprinted towards his home. Behind him, a rush of paw steps told Rusty that his attacker was giving chase. Even though the pain from his scratches stung beneath his fur, Rusty decided he would rather turn and fight than let himself be jumped on again. He skidded to a stop, spun around, and faced his pursuer. It was another kitten with a thick coat of shaggy gray fur, strong legs, and a broad face. In a heartbeat, Rusty smelled it was a Tom, and sensed the power in the sturdy shoulders underneath the soft coat. Then the kitten crashed into Rusty at full pelt. Taken by surprise by Rusty's turnabout, it fell back into a dazed heap. The impact knocked the breath out of Rusty, and he staggered. He quickly found his footing and arched his back, puffing out his orange fur, ready to spring onto the other kitten. But his attacker simply sat up and began to lick a forepaw, all signs of aggression gone. Rusty felt strangely disappointed. Every part of him was tense, ready for battle.
Hi there, kitty pet.
Mewed the gray Tom cheerily.
You put up quite a fight for a tame kitty.
Rusty remained on tiptoe for a second, wondering whether to attack anyway. They remembered the strength he had felt in this kitten's paws when he had pinned him to the ground. He chopped onto his pads, loosening his muzzles and let his spine unbend.
And I'll fight you again if I have to.
He growled.
I'm Graypaw, by the way.
The gray kitten went on, ignoring Rusty's threat.
I'm training to be a ThunderClan warrior.
Rusty remained silent. He didn't understand what this Graypaw Sid was meowing about, but he sensed the threat had passed. He hid his confusion by leaning down to lick his ruffled chest.